Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Noemi Fernandez, and I am going to be moderating this discussion this evening with our special guest, Sarah Megan Thomas, class of 2001. As I said, my name is Noemi Fernandez. I'm class of 2009, and I'm one of the co-presidents of the Philadelphia Regional Association. And I'm delighted to welcome everyone to tonight's virtual event with our screenwriter, producer, and actor, Sarah Megan Thomas. So before we get started, I'm going to take a minute to do a few updates, some thank yous, and some housekeeping notes. So first, as the co-president of the Regional Association, I would be remiss not to remind folks who are here that there are a few more events coming up this fall, including a DIY Mountain Day. So be sure you are signed up for the Philadelphia area alumni notifications if you would like to receive those updates. Second, I want to say a huge thank you to my fellow regional volunteers, Sean Cook and Mike Sullivan, McLean Daniel, Megan Bowler, and Merritt Edlund. The reason this and other events can happen is because of the collaborative effort of so many volunteers. And lastly, thank you to the Alumni Relations team for helping us host this webinar. As many of you know and have experienced, there is a lot of work that goes into the behind the scenes of these kinds of programs, and we definitely could not do this without their support. So now before I introduce Sarah, for those of you who are perhaps new, or just as a reminder, for some Zoom reminders, we have a Q&A feature that you should find at the bottom of your screen. This is a webinar, and that's how we'll be able to keep track of questions during the conversation today. You'll also be able to use the chat feature, which you will see to chat and interact with other attendees and panelists who are here. But if you could submit questions through the Q&A, that'll help us keep track. And you can also submit questions throughout the conversation. You don't have to wait until the very end if something comes to mind. But if you do, then that's totally fine as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce and welcome Sarah Megan Thomas. She grew up in the Philadelphia area before graduating from Williams with the class of 2001, and a large portion of her new film, A Call to Spy, was shot right here in the city of Philadelphia. She'll be speaking more about her experiences writing, producing, and acting in the film. And you may know Sarah's previous work with the groundbreaking film Equity, which she created, which she co-created the concept, co-wrote the story, produced, and also starred, and was also partially filmed in Philadelphia. I remember seeing it filming in my old neighborhood over on 13th and Lombard. So Equity was the first of its kind, a female-driven Wall Street thriller that premiered in dramatic competition at the Sundance Film Festival, where it was sold to Sony Picture Classics. Sarah's also previously starred in the romance drama Backwards opposite James Van Der Beek, and has appeared in various television shows such as Law and Order SVU, and starred in numerous off-Broadway productions. Sarah, thank you so much for being here with us this evening, and welcome.
Thanks for having me. So I was going to start just by giving a little bit of background on the film, and then we're going to show everyone a few clips. A Call to Spy is the first female-driven spy drama on 3 real female spies in Churchill's secret army. And I like to call it the hidden figures of the spy world. And the women are Virginia Hall, Noor Khan, and Vera Atkins. I put them together in time and space because they were firsts in their respective fields. So the first female field agent, the first female wireless, and then the first female recruiter who was in charge of finding these women. But also just because these were women from different nationalities and different backgrounds, and they united to resist evil. And it was their diversity that was the reason that their missions were successful. And I thought that even 3 years ago when I started this project, was a timely message, and now is an even more timely message. This concept that we are all in this together, and the power of the individual to make change no matter what you believe in. And what I mean by that is, and you'll see this in the character clips, you know, Virginia Hall is a fighter and Noor is a pacifist, yet they were both equally successful in their respective missions. The film sold to IFC Films, a fantastic distributor, and is out now nationwide. CallToSpyMovie.com is where you can see it. And yeah, we did shoot in Philadelphia and Budapest. I'm from Philly. I was born on 21st in Lombard. Yeah, and my parents now live in Haverford, and I went to Shipley, if there's any Shipley people out there. But I bring all my home films to Philly because it's an amazing community, but also as an independent film, there's a 25% tax credit, which is very helpful in the financing portion of an indie. So without too much more of an intro, we wanted to share some character videos with you and then talk a little more.
Great, I'm going to share some of the videos. So you'll see a change in screen with the share screen here, and we have 3 character clips for everybody. So we'll go through each of those clips and then we'll come back to our discussion.
Women like you. I would like to invite you to try out for a club unlike any other. A club for women like you who are passionate about stopping Hitler. Who are you? We should train the women like the men.
Make sure they're pretty.
For you or for the Germans?
She has a wooden leg.
She's good at her job. That's what matters. Would you suspect this girl's a spy?
Genius. Always knew your talents were wasted as my secretary.
My citizenship papers. They say no. Every time there's a knock on our door, I fear that they are coming to deport me. I am done being the unofficial, untrusted part of our team just because I was born a Jew. This war has left no one unscathed.
So that was our first clip. I'm going to share 2 more.
Excuse me. Hello. May I speak with you? Yes? Rumor has it you are the best wireless operator in the Women's Auxiliary Force. Why did you join? We all have to play our part. And what is your part? Noir? I'm a British citizen, and I grew up in France.
Sarah, can you give me an up or down if you were able to see that? Down, okay. Let me try that one again. All right, can you give me an up or down if you can see this one? Great.
Tea or scotch? Scotch would be lovely. What brings you here, Miss Hall? Ever since I can remember, I've wanted to be a diplomat.
Due to your condition, it will not be possible for you to qualify.
I had an accident. I'd like to invite you to try out for a club you can join. Pretty American reporter with a limp of being guilty of anything.
The Gestapo won't go easy on you just because you're a woman.
I don't plan to go easy on them because they're men. I understand. Sitting on the sidelines seems safe. You're doing nothing is what the Germans are counting on. Resist.
The Germans will stop at nothing till they find you.
I'm not giving up. We're not giving up.
Great, one more to share with you all.
Tea or scotch? Scotch would be.
That's the same one, right? Yeah. Let me try one more time. This is why we usually test them ahead of time. There we go.
I would like to invite you to try out for a club unlike any other. A club for women like you who are passionate about stopping Hitler. Who are you? We should train the women like the men.
I'm having a little bit trouble with the third clip, Sarah, so I will try and fix that while we have a little bit of a chat, and then once I do fix that, then we'll be able to return to the character clip of Noor.
Great.
Sorry about that, everyone. All right, so I will work on that for a second. But in the meantime, I do have a couple of questions for you that we can talk about that you already touched on. And then we also have potentially a guest who might jump on, so you can let them know when they can come onto the screen. So my first question for you, which you spoke a little bit about, was how is it that you came to make this film in Philadelphia, and what was it like to film here?
Yeah, I mean, I love Philadelphia, and I love the crews in Philadelphia. It's amazing. But with this specific film, I actually wasn't certain in the location scouting if I could make it work. Obviously, the tax credit is a big incentive, but this film takes place in France and London only. And so the question was, can we make this work? And the answer was yes, which I'm thrilled about. So how we made it work was that, if you think about it, Philadelphia was settled by the British. And so there are a lot of older architectural buildings that work for London. But in addition to that, we actually found kind of a gold mine location called Ardrossan Estate. And Ardrossan Estate is on the main line. It is the home of the family that inspired the Philadelphia story. And it is an exact replica of their home in Scotland, which was very similar to the historic mansions where these spies trained. The Nazis wouldn't find them. So when I found Ardrossan Estate, and it came fully furnished with period furniture, I knew we could kind of make this happen. So we shot the whole downstairs for Scotland, and then we shot the basement for the torture scenes, and we builded out the third floor for France. And then we went to Budapest for a lot of the exteriors where we needed France.
And you just spoke a little bit about that, but what was the process of figuring out how to make this historical film in a contemporary setting when there aren't necessarily direct connections to this between the story and the city? In other words, like, how do you hold the image in your mind about the real place and real people, but having to realize that in a place that actually doesn't exist anymore, and you aren't able to create a facsimile of that?
It's a great question. I mean, so much is research, and we had a wonderful design team led by Kim Jennings, was our production designer on this film, and she just really knocked it out of the park. I mean, you look at pictures, you look at images. We had to find the locations. We didn't have the budget to dress. So what that means is finding places like Ardrossan, the Curtis Institute. We did do one build here. We did at the Art Alliance. We built out the signal room in the movie. So that was kind of where we spent all of our money, was building a signal room. But we shot at Newlyn Grist Mill as a working mill in France. So it's really about, doing the research, and then, I mean, months and months and months of location scouting. This was a doozy, but it worked. I mean, we couldn't afford, so that for indie filmmaking, we could not afford to shoot this movie in London or France. So, when you have a certain budget and you have to, make something else work, sometimes it makes you be more creative and you end up with better solutions in the end.
Yeah, you just spoke a little bit about that, but as we know, filmmaking is not an inexpensive endeavor, regardless if it's an independent film or a major studio film. So as an independent filmmaker, how does one go about putting together the finances to support the realization of such a film?
Yeah, so with all my films, it's a combination of tax credits. There was also a 25% tax credit in Budapest, and individual investors. And actually, and we do have a special guest we're going to get to in a second, but a lot of the investors in all my films have been Williams alum. So I'm, incredibly thankful to the Williams community for just rallying around, my films in general. But how I do it is it has to do with what the film is about. So for equity, it was Women on Wall Street, and a lot of the investors came from Wall Street and wanted to see a version of a Wall Street movie that had women in it. I mean, I wrote a cold letter to Jimmy Lee, and he'd never met me in his life, and he met with me. And while he did not invest, he opened the door to so many people on Wall Street and gave me the stamp of approval. And that right there allowed me to start to have that movie made. But and with this film, it's a spy thriller. So I found people who liked that genre, or, Noor Khan, she's an Indian legend and hero. And so I was able to get some investors in the Indian American community who wanted Noor depicted in a film heroically here. But then in addition to that, it's very important to have people who have been with you all along the way. And that brings me to my special guest tonight, who is David Hoffman, who is not only a Williams grad and an amazing human and an executive producer on this film, but has kind of been involved in all my films, all three of my films. And without him, I don't think I would have a career, period. So David, do you want to unmute yourself?
Well, maybe a bit of an overstatement, but Sarah did start tutoring her kids at drama when she babysat them. And she lived across the street. And in her first movie, I agreed with her that I would be her completion investor. If she could raise the money up to a certain level, I would finish it off, which was, 10%. It wasn't huge, but I started taking that approach because she has shown a lot of courage and chutzpah and determination, as you can tell. And I think this movie is going to actually maybe pay off, which is even another good thing. But the stories have been good. They've been women-driven, and it's fun to be involved. But when you're a producer, you're not too involved because you really don't have a lot of expertise to lend, but you have spirit. So,
you can't make movies without the investors. It's just, it's so true. It's not just an art; it's a business. So without people like David, who, write the checks to make it happen, art doesn't happen, whether that's art like the painting behind David, that's beautiful, by the way, or movies or theater.
David, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
You don't invest in movies to make a fortune, especially these days. Unfortunately, it would be nice. But I just talked to Sarah about a future project, which is totally different. So, and there's always opportunities to do things that are worth doing.
Thank you, David. And thank you for joining us. And thank you for supporting, being part of the support system for this film.
It was fun.
Thanks. So I have a couple more questions for you, Sarah, about process, and then we're already getting questions in the Q&A. So as we're talking and as things come up, if folks want to continue to go ahead and add them there, that would be great. So my next question for you is thinking about the filmmaking process as a very collaborative one. There are so many steps and many distinct rules that need to be completed in order to bring the final film to our screens. But as the screenwriter and as the actor, in particular, how did you separate your role as the screenwriter who did all the research, who's this is your baby, and then handing it off to a director who is then going to translate that film, but you're still there. You're the actor who's watching someone else take over your work and bring it to fruition. So how did you approach that balance of handing something over while still being part of the translational process?
Sure. Another great question. I mean, filmmaking is a team sport. It is very much like any team sport. And there's a lot of collaborators. And it's not even just the director, it's the editor, which people don't always talk about. But like the editor, I like to say the movie's made 3 times: the script, the shoot, and the edit room. And they're usually all different beasts, so to speak. But everyone has their stamp on this movie. And I think what it comes down to is hiring the right team of people who believe in the script and believe in the vision to begin with, because that's important. Like you're not handing it off, you're elaborating and elevating what is the base. And so with Lydia, our director, you know, we worked very closely all the way through to the final cut. And we had the same vision, so to speak. You know, Lydia comes from a producing background. She's been the producer for all of Mira Nair's films, and she has a very global eye, and this is a global film. You know, we have actors from Canada, India, the UK, and so she really understood the global nature of this script, and so it was an easy pairing. But the other thing that has to happen with the research is that you have to do all your research, even as a screenwriter. And like I had access to all these spy files. I spoke to family, I spoke to living relatives. But at the end of the day, you cannot fit all that in a 2-hour movie, and you have to stay true to the structure of the plot. So at a certain time, both as a screenwriter and as a producer and as an actress, you have to know the research is there. And this is like 90% accurate, what you see in the film. It's really research, but then you also have to let it go and bring yourself to it, because otherwise it's not a living, breathing piece of art.
Picking up on that, because this is a historical film about real historical figures, it seems like a huge responsibility to get it right, to sort of put that in quotes, whether it's like a speech pattern of someone who is from, in the 1940s, to the actual building out of a character whose story is famous, as you mentioned, but maybe isn't widely known. So how do you, as an actor, sink your teeth into that, and what's your process there?
You know, that was the big challenge on this one, especially because these ladies were spies. So they didn't give any interviews and they didn't talk about what they did. So while you know the facts from their spy files, or some of the facts, some of them are still hidden, you don't know what's under the hood. When I did speak to Virginia Hall's living relatives, they were able to give me insight onto her personality, little things like she played the pirate chief in all the school plays. She wore a snake bracelet to school, she called herself cantankerous. Those little details were really helpful as an actress to latch onto the emotional. And then the limp, she had a tragic accident. Virginia Hall shot her leg off with her father's shotgun while hunting snipe when she was 27 years old in Turkey. She almost died. She lost her leg. She had a wooden leg. And she named her wooden leg historically Cuthbert, and it was very much a part of her for the rest of her life, and she was discriminated against it. And so finding out how it was for her, like that she was in pain every day, how big was the limp, how small was the limp, there was controversy, like her family said she tried to hit it and some people didn't even know she had a limp, yet the Germans called her the limping lady. So finding that balance, but at the end of the day, 100 actresses could play Virginia Hall brilliantly, and it's all about bringing me to that role within the confines of what's historically true. And for me, I connected to her ability to not take no for an answer. I think that's her determination to do something no matter what anyone said is what really hooked me into her.
Sort of following up on that, and then this will be my last question before we open it up to Q&A. We're getting lots of questions, so I'll try and synthesize those because there are a couple different themes there. So my last question for you, you spoke about the editing process, and I agree. It's very frequently and has historically been something that is women's work. And yet can often make the film or make the story. So can you talk about the editing process? whether that was at the end, and anything that was maybe put on, had to be left on the cutting room floor during that process that you loved, but you just had to let it go for story-wise, or for any other reason, and just broadly that the end of that process that I don't think folks are necessarily familiar with.
Well, my kissing scenes had to go on the cutting room floor because my husband said no. No, I'm kidding. I mean, they did go on the cutting room floor, but that's not why. That's, we didn't want, and I certainly didn't want there to be a romance like that took over this whole film, but there was one romance scene, which we didn't feel, we wanted to have it, but we didn't feel worked. So that ended up on the cutting room floor with the doctor. But half the movie is on the cutting room floor. So I mean, this is a 4-hour, we taped 4 hours of footage, and that a lot of any movie is on the cutting room floor. With this in particular, it was very challenging because it's not a biopic of one woman. It is an ensemble piece about 3 women, and the confines of a feature film versus a miniseries, which I would love to make, but didn't have the budget or the interest to make, at the time. You can get into the personal lives more than you can in a 2-hour film. So if there was too much home life for any character, of which we have home life, but if there was too much home life, that had to be sacrificed a little for plot. But then in terms of the editing process, it was very challenging. We had an amazing BAFTA-nominated editor, Paul Tothill, who did Atonement. And, I spent the money on the editor. Like I said, you have to, find out where you're going to spend the money. I spent it on the editor because, finding that balance was important, but test screenings were invaluable. So we did test screenings at NYU, test screenings everywhere to kind of see what works, what doesn't, and then hopefully by the end of final cut, you have a balance.
Great, thank you. I could ask you questions all day. I'm so fascinated with this, and as someone who works in the arts and humanities, and particularly with film and young film makers at the college I work at, I wish they were here to ask you more questions as well. But we're gonna turn it over because there are other folks who are here, even though we can't see you all on the screen. We know that you're there and your questions are coming in fast and furiously. So I'm gonna take a quick minute to see them coming in. A theme that's coming up in some of those questions is twofold. So I'll start with this is a Williams supported alumni event. So I'll start there. So someone writes that Williams has been, historically one of the schools that are, the CIA and other, previously OSS organizations would recruit from. So in your research process, or even in the process of making this film, did you encounter either any other Williams alums in the story making process, or did anyone from those, CIA contact you about this film in any way as you were diving into some of the research?
So we're doing a CIA screening next week. So yes, is the answer. But so my character, Virginia Hall, is the first woman to work for the CIA after the war. And she did work for the OSS during the war after our movie ends. And the CIA has been so incredible and so supportive. They wanted this story to be told. They like the final product. Same with the OSS. So it was a real pleasure that they enjoyed the film. In terms of Williams grads there, not that I know of, but that's not to say that there weren't.
So I'll sort of use that to lead into some other questions about process. So there are a lot of questions about sources and your writing process. So really, what is your writing process, and what was your research process like in finding original sources about these women? They were spies, right? This is confidential. This is underground. So how did you go about that research process, and then turning that into your writing process?
Yeah, so the research, the good news there is that there is a lot of available research now, at this point it was 2016 available. So I had the archives, the spy files from the SOE on Virginia Hall, Noor and Vera Atkins, or what was left in them, right? And so what those things are is they're like letters Virginia Hall wrote to London when she was in the field. And actually, as a writer, like there are several quote unquote possibly archaic lines in the script that are actually directly from the spy files. And I felt like I couldn't cut them. Like I really wanted there to be a nod and a wink to what these women actually said. An example is Virginia Hall says to London, you know, it's my neck, and if there's a crick, if I want to get a crick in it, that's my prerogative. And I just thought that was a really cool line about who she is. Those files also include how they were graded. So Noor was historically graded in training as childlike, not prepared, shouldn't be a spy, yet when she was captured and tortured, she never gave up any information, and she was very brave. So anyway, that was a lot of the research in terms of the spy files. I had the OSS files, and then, as I mentioned, speaking to friends and living family where possible. In terms of my writing process, you know, this is an original screenplay, so it's not based on any book. The fiction that I created is that Virginia Hall and Noor Khan never met. They were actually 2 years apart in the war. But I thought it would make for a more global story to put these women together in time and space as the first female field agent and the first female wireless, you know, Noor being Indian, Virginia being American, fighter, pacifist, and again, explore this broader theme of how we can all be different and unite, and you know, our diversity is an asset. So I made them roommates in training, and then I did stay on Virginia's timeline because Noor's timeline was later and more expensive to shoot. You couldn't get to D-Day. D-Day's not in this movie. That's for J.J. Abrams. But so that's also part of the script. I chose to focus on the beginning of the war in 1941 when we were losing, but also when this program was an experiment. So women were sent in to spy as an experiment because they were losing, not only because that was indie friendly, but I also felt like that was an interesting idea, like volunteering for something where you don't even know if it's going to be successful. As a writer, I rewrite and rewrite and rewrite, and people bring things to the table, and you know, you have to listen, even if it's hard at times, and you're like, no, and then you're like, oh man, they're right. You know, you have to cut the first 10 pages, all that stuff that they tell you. You know, and then actors bring their own self, and you have to listen to them and what words they want to say if something doesn't feel right. So writing is a very collaborative process for me. I don't sit down at 9 in the morning and end at 10 o'clock at night. Like I write in while I'm fundraising, while I'm doing business plans, while I'm doing casting. So it's very fluid for me.
So we were talking a lot about you as a screenwriter, and you're talking about your screenwriting process and your research process. We do have some questions about your acting process. You know, in the film, you portray someone who has a prosthetic. Could you talk a little bit about what it was like as an actor to work with a different physical attribute, and maybe a little bit about your research into how Virginia Hall went about her life with that prosthetic?
Yeah, so that was kind of, the physicality of her was the first thing I wanted to get right. In fact, I met with someone in New York who was a prosthesis specialist and saw and held all the different prostheses from the 30s and the 40s, and they were built for men, which interestingly enough. So Virginia Hall's prosthesis didn't even fit her leg because it was built for a man's leg, so she had constant blisters her entire life, you know, and was in constant pain. But in terms of the physicality, for me as an actress, even if I was off camera and you were my acting partner and I'm acting with you, I had to sit a certain way. I had to feel like I had that limp. I had to have the prosthesis we were using on, the fake prosthesis on my leg, because I felt without it, I was not her. And that was really important to me as the actress. We used a wooden contraption that was very heavy that went into my leg, that tied to my back. And we used that for about 10 days till my back went out because it pulled my back. So then we switched to a combination of that in the shots and then like a lighter styrofoam. But then after the movie, my Achilles tendon on that leg completely ruptured from all of this. And I had to have surgery, and I couldn't walk for a year due to complications from the surgery. So that brought an entire new perspective after playing Virginia Hall, where I thought I understood what it was like, but didn't. I mean, like, for example, I was in a wheelchair for a long time, and I'm a tall woman, I was an athlete, I'm confident, but people look at you differently when you're in a wheelchair. They just do, and they don't even know they're doing it. And so you know, I can only imagine the looks she got day in and day out while she was trying to do work. I mean, the only other thing I can say that's not about the leg that was helpful to me as an actress, because as a producer and writer, you have to constantly be ahead of the game and thinking. And as an actor, you have to be in the moment. So they're completely, you know, opposite parts of your brain. I would ask for a 5-minute call, and I would go into a corner with earphones and listen to Churchill's speeches. And it just really helped me in that 5 minutes breathe and kind of shift back to 1941.
Thank you. We have some other questions that are coming in. So as you were speaking, one of the questions that came to mind that's in the Q&A is, and a lot of people have asked this, is how did you even find out about Virginia? Like, how did you even come across their stories? Where did that happen for you? And then was it, you know, different for each of them, or did it sort of come as an epiphany? How did you even learn about these famous women whom we, and I certainly didn't know about before watching your film?
So there is actually a Williams connection here, but to back up, as a filmmaker, I always start with a genre for 2 reasons. A, it has to be a genre I think I can raise the money for, and B, it has to be something that I think will entertain and hopefully make money back for my investors. So, you know, sports film, Wall Street film, I knew I wanted to do a spy film. And then I look at what's missing with a female lens. So I start global and then go smaller. So with spy films, I knew after Equity, when I was on press tour, I was thinking, what am I going to do next? Everyone asks you this question. I have no idea, right? And so I was like, I know I want to do a spy film. I love James Bond. I actually love the big budget aspect of James Bond and the car chase, etc. But whenever there's a female-driven spy film, whether that's Charlotte Gray or Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it is an entire romance. That is the whole thing. And so I was like, where is the kind of indie version, nitty-gritty psychology of what it's like to be a spy? And the thriller aspect of the movie is, will they or won't they die? Because you care about them as human beings. So I actually, this is a funny story, winter study, I think it was my freshman year, I couldn't get into any of the classes I wanted because I was a freshman and I don't know, end of the alphabet, whatever. So I was stuck in World War II. So I had to take a winter term on World War II at Williams, which as a freshman was not my first choice. But that was where like I became completely fascinated and obsessed kind of with the time period. And I knew that Churchill had a secret army. So I started the research there with Churchill's secret army, and I knew there were women spies. And then when I started digging around and uncovered kind of these first women, started with Virginia and Vera, and then Noor migrated into later scripts when I figured out that there was the first female wireless. But it was a 2-hander that merged into a 3-hander.
Gotcha. There's always a Williams connection somewhere. We can't help it. So there are a couple of different questions here that I'll try and synthesize a little bit for folks. And then if we have probably about 10 or 12 more minutes before we start to wrap up. So if there are any unspoken comments or questions that folks want to drop in, please do so that we can get to your questions. So this one is particularly about some of the harder scenes to watch. So particularly the violence in the film and the violence perpetrated against Noor in particular. So what was your thinking or process in writing those and then bringing them to the screen in a way that was not necessarily, as someone says, quote, blood and guts, but portrayed the horror of what was happening to those individuals?
Yeah, so for me, when I watch gore in a World War II movie, at this point, having seen a lot of World War II movies, it actually takes me out of the movie as opposed to draws me in. Sometimes I do feel that gore is used for gore's sake as opposed to like the emotional impact of the violence on these people. So it was very important to me that we're, you know, true with what happened to Noor. She was murdered, you know, but it's done in a way where it's more emotional, and that's finding a balance. You know, I'm very proud that this movie is rated PG-13, and that was intentional. Almost all World War II movies are rated R, and the concept there was that we really want young women to be able to see this film and look up to these women as real heroes, and these women should be in our history books and aren't. But you know, even with Dr. Chauvin, who has some torture, or even Virginia, like, you know, as soon as you kind of go in, we try and cut away. And like with Dr. Chauvin, you hear his scream over the next scene to kind of give you that emotional impact without showing it. I also chose methods of torture that weren't maybe seen before, the boiling water, etc.
Thank you. I'm gonna try before we wrap up the end to see the Noor clip again, because I think it's important to see her and see her story as well. So I'll ask a couple more questions and I'll give it 30 seconds. And if it doesn't work, thank you everyone for working with us here. We know Zoom is not the optimal way of being able to engage with any sort of viewing experience, especially one that has taken so much time, love, and attention. So we'll try and give Noor her moment as well. So a slightly different question here for you. So someone says, Jill says, I'm a college freshman next year planning to study film. What advice do you have for aspiring filmmakers?
I think you have to find something that really drives you if you want to make movies, like a subject that you're so passionate about that you have to tell it, and that you're willing, when you're out of college, you know, to spend 3 or 4 years of your life on that one project, because each movie does take that much time to make, and that's actually fast tracked. So finding something that you bring to the table that you're passionate about that hasn't been told before. And then the other thing is just make it. Like, I didn't know what I was doing when I made my first film. I went to Barnes and Nobles and bought books and read them. So, you know, people, you can do it. You just have to do it.
Thank you. And let's see. And for that person, there are many avenues, I would add, Williams, to engage in creative process, filmmaking being certainly one of them, the one we're talking about here. So I encourage that person to seek out others who are also interested in the things that you care about and hear filmmaking, because it's always more fun to do it with other, to do it with other people than doing it by yourself. And Sarah's talked about how collaborative that process is. So I would encourage you to do that as well. So we have a few more questions, and then we'll try and wrap up for people and keep everyone on time. So some of this has to do with the marketing aspects. We've talked a lot about the filmmaking and what goes into the filmmaking. But how do you go about, once you have a film or you're in process of the film, how do you go about marketing that film? And particularly, how do you choose what to show people? And what not to show people in that process as you're trying to build interest around the work?
Well, I think it's too late to start the marketing when the movie's done, or even when the movie's shooting. So I would say start the marketing at the concept. So for example, with Backwards, like, I knew the Olympics was 4 years away, where rowing was an event, and when I wrote it, it was able to be released then, and then the women won the gold medal, and then we got on the Today Show because of that, not because it was, the film that was going to be on the Today Show. Was the marketing hook. So with this film, again, it was starting the marketing hooks early. With press, if you do a big press piece, like say the New York Times, while you're shooting, and sometimes people will ask, they'll only write once about your movie, and that was a lesson I learned on my first film. So you have to balance building the buzz with also not taking away from the marketing that you need during release. So festivals are a really great way to do that. We're in the pandemic world, so I don't know if that's the best advice right this second, because the festivals aren't really happening except virtual, and then piracy is a risk. But building that word of mouth as early as possible, finding your target audience. Again, for this film, there's like 4 books on Virginia Hall that just came out. So we're finding those book club readers who have already just read about the character and then are going to be inclined to see the movie. So take it above and beyond just it's a good movie to who really is going to want to spend the money to buy it. Oh. Hello.
Oh, you're
Ah,
back.
good, you're back. Okay, great.
I'm back.
Excellent. I was just saying there, not everyone, but many people on this conversation are Williams alumni. So there's some questions coming in about your experience at Williams. So is there everything from what was your major to any favorite classes or like major impacts from that? Have you met any Williams alumni in film during your career as a filmmaker and actor? So are there connections there for you? And is there anything about your Williams experience that you wanted to share with people?
Sure. Yes to both. So I was a rower at Williams, and then I was a theater major. And I loved the theater department. I was actually hoping that the theater would be completed before my graduation. I think it was the year after, and it's so beautiful, and I was so bummed. But other than that, I did my thesis on Harold Pinter at Williams, who's my favorite playwright. And I love the Williams community in terms of embracing whatever it is you want to do and helping you kind of thrive. You know, because being an actress wasn't necessarily, my parents were the most supportive people in the world, two lawyers, first choice, you know, for their daughter. Nor would it be the first choice of me for my daughter. So, you know, but in terms of joking aside, the Williams community, again, like I couldn't make my films without it. And I mean that. I have so many investors in this film from the Williams community. You know, Joey Horn's an executive producer. You know, I think there's about 12 Williams investors in this film. But then also we had to do reshoots, which happens in every movie. Like you do test screens and you figure out you're missing this little bit. And with this film, we realized that when the resistance is being built, we didn't have enough montage bits to make it feel like a real resistance. So we had to go shoot those. And I didn't have any money. I was out of money. And so I had to do it like DIY style. And I called up my dear friends, Craig DeFalco and Michael Skirdo, who are a year older than me at Williams. And I said, I need your help, and we've got to do it like really indie. And they came in a weekend, and we went back to our Drawson, and they just really helped me out. And then my entertainment lawyer is Peter Nelson, who's a Williams grad. So I mean, there's just so many people in the community that were involved in this film.
Is there anyone else that you wanted to thank or bring up, or that you wanted to mention, whether it's director or other people that you worked with in bringing this film to life?
You know, I don't want to mention any more people by name because I will forget people. Not, you know, like I think if you watch the credits for this movie, what I would say is they run for 5 minutes, and there's a reason. There were that many people who helped make this film happen. I think I do want to thank IFC Films, because in this pandemic landscape, distribution is really challenging, and a lot of films aren't getting out there. You know, theaters are largely closed, and IFC has been so innovative with their business model. So I feel very thankful that we are in their hands.
Would you want to mention quickly, before I try and show this clip of, I would really like to show this clip of Noor, where people can find your film?
Yes, so the film is what's called a day and date model. It is in theaters that are open in certain places, and it is also on demand everywhere nationwide. So Amazon, Apple, iTunes, Comcast, Verizon. If you go to acalltospymovie.com, it has the trailer in case this clip doesn't work, and also where you can see it. And the other thing I do want to say is it's very, very, very important to independent films that if you respond to them, that you tell your friends. Word of mouth is crucial, and that you know, get on social media if you're comfortable, and tweet and rate things positively if you respond to it, because whether it's this film or anyone else's film, that's how we can make more female stories, is by making money and by being successful. And I think that's important.
And I looked, and I haven't seen it necessarily released local. Do you know when it might be coming to Philadelphia in the near future or future?
We did, so we premiered at the Drive-In last week, which was a lot of fun. I was there and I introduced it, so that was a lot of fun. And here in the theaters, you know, BMFI's closed, Ambler's closed. A lot of the theaters are closed. We're in Reading, we're in New Jersey, we're in Delaware. So all that's on the website. But I think for Philadelphia right now, your best bet is going to be watching on Comcast or Amazon.
I got mine on Google Play, so it's lots of places. All right, folks, I'm going to try and play this clip of Noor one more time. I will give it 30 seconds. So hopefully, if you can't see anything, then we'll come back and we'll close up and finish up in a second. But I'm hoping that it'll work this time. We got 2 out of 3, which for Zoom is that's more than 50%. So we're doing pretty well. So let's just try one more time. And Sarah, will you give me an up or down? Because I can still see you when I do the screen share. Great. All right.
Excuse me? Hello. May I speak with you? Yes? Rumor has it you are the best wireless operator in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. Why did you join?
We all have to play our part.
And what is your part, Noor?
I'm a British citizen, and I grew up in France. It's my home. I cannot just stand by and let the Nazis do what they're doing.
I would like to invite you to try out for a club unlike any other.
Get it.
Our first female wireless. Good luck to you.
My family needs you here. I have to do something.
Did we get it that time? Great. Excellent. So the last thing, and this is one last question, and since we did end with Noor, she's the only one who didn't make it. Could you say a little bit about Noor and her story and what it is that you found about her and any other things you might direct people if they want to know more about Noor or any of the women in the film?
Absolutely. So to find out more about Nora and other people, you can just actually Google their names, and you'll see a ton of research. But Nora in particular was just awarded Britain's prestigious Blue Plaque, and she's the first woman of Indian descent to ever receive that award, and that just happened this year. And she was also considered for the 50-pound note in the UK. She's very much a hero there. I think history has looked very kindly on Virginia Vera and Noor. Noor was awarded all these medals for bravery. She was a pacifist. She was a British citizen of Indian descent. She wrote fairy tale stories for children before the war. But she did live in France at parts of her life and felt very passionate about freedom. Liberté, historically, was her last words when she was murdered by the Nazis. And in fact, the original title for this film was Liberté, A Call to Spy. That's not really a commercial film. So the Liberté had to be dropped just because it couldn't sound like a French film for sales purposes. But I did retain that, in the movie, her last words are Liberté, which was the reason she was fighting for freedom.
Thank you. So we are just about out of time, and that's a really great, and well, not great, but it's a powerful place to end. So, but before we do, Sarah, is there anything else that you would like to say about the film, your experience, your process, classes not to take at Williams or classes to take at Williams, anything at all?
Well, I will say sometimes you get dealt a hand like a winter study that you're not planning, or and it turns out to be a blessing in disguise. So, if there are any filmmakers out there, the one thing that I wish someone had told me is that there are just so many highs and lows in filmmaking on a daily basis. And as I've gone a little further in my career, to not take the highs or the lows so seriously. But no, I'm really thankful to the entire Williams community and to you for hosting tonight. I really mean it, that I would not be making my films without the support of the Williams alumni community.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing so much of your process and of yourself and of your time this evening. I know you're doing a lot of promo and press for this film, and I hope I've seen it come up in lots of different places, and it's been reviewed in highlighted in the Inquirer as well for, again, the Philly folks who are around. So I hope folks are able to see it, to read about it, and to share it widely with your friends and family and coworkers, and just we'll shout it down the streets of Philadelphia these days. But thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you to everyone who attended this evening and who made this event possible. It's a Thursday night at 8 o'clock, and I know a lot of people have lots of things to do at this time of evening and day after many long days of being on Zoom already. So thank you to everybody who was able to be here, but especially to Sarah and your family for making the time, giving you the time, making the time to be here this evening. So we are just about out of time. Thanks everyone, and hopefully we will see you all at other events in the near, virtual, remote, socially distanced events in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you.